Welcome to episode 11 of Two Dumb White Guys. My name's Paul Davidson.
And my name is Scott Norman.
And this is kind of part 2 of our last episode. We originally planned to talk about the stuff we're talking about today on our Angotti episode, but that one ran a little bit long because Angotti is a windy guy.
Oh, gosh.
Well,
So he is an expert storyteller.
He is.
That's how we'll say
He's a
that.
raconteur.
There you go. We actually plan on at some point bringing him on for part 2. We've had several requests already, and clearly he is a prime guest, so he will probably, Lord willing, be back on the podcast.
But is he our best guest?
I don't know. Competition
Between our two
dun.
guests. All right, but today we're going to finish that. We're going to talk about our own first-year teaching experiences and how we became a teacher and how we got into this profession and all that fun jazz. So, Mr. Norman, start us off. Why/how did you become a teacher?
Well, of course, if you can't teach, no, I'm kidding. That's the real way is we talked a lot about alt-cert for those of you who listened to the last one, alternative certification. I went the kind of traditional certification at SEMO. I actually started out, however, coming out of high school, I wanted to be in media. And so my first 2 years at SEMO...
Which is why you're so hot on the mic, man.
Yeah, well, I can do all this ASMR. And knock things over. All right, so I never once heard of ASMR in media, by the way. So I actually started out doing a dual major in radio and video production. Did that for about a year and a half and began to realize very quickly that the job opportunities in radio and video production stick you in a cubicle dialing buttons or behind a camera. At least for, several years after you get out, unless you're a true creative that can really come up with
you could be your own
and things.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those people. And so I started going, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? And I genuinely started praying about it, and I'm trying to figure out what am I supposed to do with my life. And I really genuinely felt like God was like, dude, I stuck you at this school. It's awesome at education degrees because there's a reason, right?
That's
and so
plan B.
Yeah, exactly. And so that plan B became my plan A. It wasn't actually my plan B. Like, I didn't have it backed up just in case. But that became the thing that I really felt like God was like, hey, go do this. You need to be a teacher. And so I switched over and met the guru of social studies education, Dr. Fridley. And he told me if I wanted to do anything other than be a social studies teacher, that I should.
And I'll talk about that actually, we can talk about that now because we both actually had to go through Fridley's program.
Yes.
We talked about Seth Ward, and he said that he thought I was older than him.
Yes.
I figured it out. I was the first group that went all 4 years with Fridley, and I'm pretty positive Fridley was like Seth Ward's advisor like his last 2 years.
Okay.
So that was part of the reason why there was that weird overlap there. That's a story that no one on the podcast even cares about, but it's a conversation we've had.
If you ever listen to us, Dr. Fridley or Seth Ward, shout out.
But yes, Dr. Fridley, he did an excellent job with that because I remember when I first got in the program, there was like 40 people trying to be social studies teachers, and by the end of block 1, that number had dropped from 40 down to 20. At the end of block 3, that dropped from 20 down to 14, and at the end of block 4, we were down to 12 social studies teaching majors.
Ours wasn't quite that dramatic, but we went from 30-something, it was like 33, I'm making up the second number, 30-something, and we graduated 13. And I don't think all of them that graduated actually ended up graduating as social studies teachers. Several of them went off to do other things. I know one went into law enforcement, and a couple other guys did other stuff. So the cool thing there isn't like that, oh man, it's a really tough program and it just scares people. That's not really how they structured it. It was just genuinely helping you understand, like, do you really want to do this? This is what this is like. And I think the program did a really good job of that.
Oh yeah, I like all 12 of the people or the 11 other people I graduated with in that class. I feel 100% confident as their abilities as a teacher, and I would be more than happy to have my kids learn from them.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's kind of cool, like within the educator world. I didn't realize this was kind of a thing, but when I did actually meet you for the first time and we had that conversation, it was kind of like, oh yeah, this guy's probably a pretty good teacher too. Like he made it through.
Yeah, yeah. He's a part of the Fridley fraternity, man.
Yes, and so Dr. Fridley, if you ever do listen to this, just know that I am currently giving you the class of 2013 low-hanging fruit salute.
And I hope that you're still using the shake weight that we bought you.
Wait, we heard about that.
Yeah, that was the part. We were at a Mexican restaurant there in Cape, like in front of Kings Highway, the King Center, there, and we were sitting there. It was like the last time we ever were gonna hang out together, and we talked to each other. It's like, this is our last time we're gonna have Fridley for class. We should do something crazy for him. And somebody was like, let's get him a shake weight, and we were like, that's a great idea.
That kind of gauges when that graduation year was as well. That's awesome, though. So, yeah, so I guess to kind of finish off that thing is I started out not doing that, switched into that, and I learned a ton through those next 2 years going through the block program and learning from Dr. Fridley and just being around a lot of people who are really passionate about teaching.
Where'd you do your blocks?
Okay, so block 1 was Dexter. That was just the one observation, right? Okay, so block 1 was Dexter. And I observed in a guy's classroom that's no longer there at Dexter, who's a really nice guy and let me come in. But I had not met him before, and I have not met him since. But I went in and observed in his classroom, and it was kind of the classic, teaching from the book and going with the book PowerPoint and stuff like that. Block 2 was at the alternative school in Cape.
Oh, that had to be fun.
So block 2 is at the alternative school. Fun fact about that experience, I was student teaching a student who was older than me. So I was 19, he was 19, but he was older 19 than I was. And I never told him that. But I was one of my kids.
That was an awkward situation.
Yeah,
there.
And it was one of those things where you look at him and you start talking to him and you're like, man, this guy seems, at my age then, now I'd think of him as a young guy, but at the time I was like, man, this guy doesn't seem like a high schooler, because he really shouldn't have been a high schooler. But anyway, so I student taught there. That was actually a blast because I got to see how to really the teacher there. I remember her as Miss K, and I don't remember what the full name was. I'd have to go back and look, but Miss K.
This is not our Miss K.
No, not our Miss K. It was a different Miss K. I'm sure our Miss K is also good as well, but this Miss K that I student taught with did an incredible job of basically being willing to show up with extensive, detailed lesson plans, realize that it just wasn't going to work, throw them completely out the window, and do something completely different to teach the same thing. And I just, watching that was cool, and it's something that you can't replicate always. She had, classes of 4 to 15. So it was just easy to adapt it. But just being able to see that kind of flexibility was like, okay, I need to be prepared to do this. Then I moved on in Block 3. I was in Sykeston at the school there.
I did my block 3 at Sykeston too.
Oh, really?
Actually, no, I did my block 2 at Sykeston. My bad.
Okay,
I did my block 3. I did my block 1 at Cape Junior High. I did my block 2 at Sykeston, and I did my block 3 at New Mattard.
Okay, so who was your teacher at Sykeston?
Sykeston, Larry Batchelor. He had retired that year.
Yeah, I had a. She was the head of the department. And I am completely brain farting on the name. If you ever listen to this, I'm very grateful for you giving me the opportunity. I'm just bad at remembering names.
The woman I did my block 3 under was Deborah McRaven.
McRaven?
Yeah, I actually remembered my people.
Thanks. Maybe Williams? Anyway, I'm really sorry for not remembering that name. But she did an awesome job of kind of letting me just drop into the fire there for one unit and telling me, hey, here's what you did good, here's what you did bad, here's what you need to improve on. And it was very constructive. It was really helpful. Then block 4, I did 8 weeks at Dexter and 8 weeks at Cape Central.
You're one of the rare people that got to do the same school twice.
Yes, and that was because I was not from here, and my grandparents live in Dexter.
I have a rarity, too, myself. My block 4, I did my first 8 weeks at Kennett. And my last 8 weeks I did at Portageville, which of course you're not supposed to student teach at the place that you graduated from.
Yeah.
But I was able to pull it off because no one wanted to go south. And so they're like, if you're willing to go south, you can go wherever you want. I was like, Portageville. They're like, fine, just good. You're not anywhere near Cape. Good. Just go.
Yeah.
Go. Leave.
So
Actually, I did my student teaching in Mr. Norman's room.
Yep. He taught in that room before I did.
Yep.
Even though we were hired at the same time here. So I made it all the way through all of those blocks. Learned a ton. I really enjoyed both of my Block 4 teachers were awesome. I was with Mr. Williams at Dexter, and he basically let me sit there for a week. And he was like, watch what I do. Watch what I don't do, all that. And then he goes, week 2, you're teaching. Go. And so it was just right into it. And for the first week, he just sat in the back of the class and was just observing everything. And so I was super nervous. And then he started doing the thing where he'd be like, I'm just going to go grab something. And he'd disappear for 15 minutes. And so I had to just control the room. And anyway, so it was an awesome
trust
experience.
me, I've been there.
That's
kind of
experience.
how mine also worked. Mine were Neil Bradley, and I was actually split between 2 teachers at Kennett. I was Neil Bradley and Jamie Russell, and I had all of the all of Kennett's American history. That's what I had. And then while I was here at Portageville, I was actually under Coach Red.
There you go. He needs to be a guest on this podcast.
He does.
We need to get him on here.
Coach Red would be an excellent one. He could talk you. He could teach you how to be a lineman, Norman.
Oh gosh.
He could teach you how to be a lineman.
I'm a little bit diminutive. But anyway, so I ended up graduating 2013 and started my, we'll get into the first job. We'll get to that in a second.
So let me tell you how I became a teacher. I graduated from high school in 2006. I went to Arkansas State, and I planned on being a computer science major. Was in there for about a year. My grades weren't necessarily the greatest. I had I didn't fail any classes, but I had C's, and I was like, this isn't really working out. And I realized that most of my classes I was good at, that I had good grades in, was social studies. So I was like, all right, let's change it up. And I was hanging out with a lot of people who were geography majors at the time. And so I was like, all right, I'll be a geography major, and I'll do stuff with GIS, geographic information systems, mapping, computer maps and whatnot. And so I thought about doing that for a while, and then as I kept on going through that geography program at Arkansas State, I saw how most people ended up just being teachers, and I thought to myself, you know what, I might as well just become a social studies teacher, and if I'm going to become a teacher, I might as well get a formal teacher education.
Yeah.
And so I decided to transfer to Cape, which is traditionally known as a really good teaching college. And so I went to Cape and met Dr. Fridley, and I pretty much through all that. I did add an extra year on me because I had changed my major not once, but twice.
I gotcha.
And so I ended up graduating in 5 years, and I graduated class of 2011. And voila, and that brings us to our next question.
Yeah, and so the next question then is, how did you get your first teaching job?
I did not find a job right out of college. I was a social studies teaching major. I applied at a bunch of places. I applied to Alaska, down in Louisiana. I applied all over the place.
Alaska would suck.
All over the place. And I applied at, I interviewed at Kennett. I interviewed at Risco. I interviewed all kinds of places, and I just couldn't find a job for social studies teaching. And so I started subbing, and I was subbing at North Pym of all places. And I had been subbing there for about a week or two, and they give me a phone call in at the beginning of November, and they're like, "Hey, you need to come in. You just need to come in right now." I'm like, "Okay." And so I get there, and the secretary's like, "Good, you're here. You have no lesson plans, and the principal wants to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay." And I walked into the classroom, which so happened to be an English classroom, and I said, "Hey, guys, what are we doing?" And they said, "We've been reading The Crucible." And I was like, "Well, let's keep reading The Crucible then." So we're reading The Crucible, and the principal knocks on the door near the end of the hour, invites me out in the hallway and says, "Yeah, the man who currently has his position no longer works here. How would you like to teach English for the foreseeable future?" And since I was an unemployed teacher, I was like, yeah, I'll teach English. Sure. Had no idea how to teach it. And I all of a sudden went from no job to a job where I had 6 preps for 6 different types of English and had to just go from there.
My goodness.
And I never found out why he got fired.
Oh, that would have been a curious tidbit. But I guess that might be TMI for sharing on our podcast as well. But yeah, that is crazy. So here's my question: was there a point where, like, that year, because you still teach English, where you went, okay, no, I would prefer to now find social studies, or did you kind of get to the point where you're like, hey, I like this?
I still tried to get social studies teaching jobs. In fact, whenever I started to apply for other places, because North Pim said, yeah, we're probably not going to hire you full time, so you might want to look for other places. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so I applied for other social studies teaching jobs at the same time with English, but I got certified to teach English. I passed my praxis in English, so I was licensed to teach English.
Oh, we forgot to talk about the praxis.
Yeah.
The joys of the test that everyone freaks out about, and then really wasn't that bad.
Like the thing to remember, the thing about the praxis is, if you're going to teach that subject, you should be able to pass the praxis. If you can't pass your praxis for your subject, well, I know with like elementary and middle school, there's the pedagogical stuff that is a little bit different. But if you're a high school teacher and you can't pass the praxis, no offense to anybody that can't, but
they really tried to like kind of freak us out on the praxis. Like, man, you got to study, you got to do all this stuff, and I did. I'd studied for it, and I tried, like, I was all set for it, and I got in there and took it, and I was like, that's it?
Yeah. Like it was like, oh, that was pretty easy. Like, I've passed both my praxises by like 30 plus points.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had to take the social studies one, and then I got certified 5th through 12th, so I could teach middle school as well. And that one is the one everybody's like, oh, the middle school one's going to be really hard. And I had trouble remembering all the names of specific, like, for various parts of pedagogy, the people who came up with them, but it apparently didn't hurt me. I just basically said, here's the ideas that they put forth, and, and explained it. But it was nowhere near, like, as terrifying as I thought it was going to be. I expected to have to, like, retake it or something.
But yeah, but back to our original point, yeah, I tried to find, like, I kept on trying to find, in fact, I stopped trying to find social studies teaching jobs whenever I got hired here at Porterville. And we'll talk about,
good, because I took it.
Yeah, well, actually, I talked to, like I mentioned on Coach Bullock's podcast, like, I applied here at Porterville 3 times. The first time was Miss Watson got the job over me, which from what I heard, that's perfectly fine. She was a more qualified English teacher than me at the time. The second time, Coach Zach McDaniel got the job, in which that was also kind of like the hybrid thing with the coaching and the foreign language stuff. And I wasn't necessarily that great of a coach, and I didn't really want to do the foreign language stuff, so that was fine.
Yeah.
The year I got hired, we had 2 English openings and a social studies opening, and I was like, if I don't get hired this time, I'm just gonna give up. I'm just gonna give up.
It's just not happening.
It'll be an 0 for 3. Like, yeah. But luckily it happened, and now I'm here to torture all of you fine listeners.
Yeah. Well, if you're students, if you're not students, then please don't come to be tortured by Coach David. Excuse me. I said Coach Davidson. He's not a coach.
Not anymore. I was actually a junior high baseball coach at one point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you could have done the baseball thing.
I couldn't. I was horrible. I was horrible at it. We won a conference tournament or a conference championship. Had no idea how, but
skill. That's what it was. Your coaching right there. Yeah. So
yes, but that's my experience of how I got my first year teaching job, my very first teaching job. Mr. Norman, how did you get your first teaching job?
An act of God. So I started applying, and I genuinely, at my point of graduation, was still torn on what. In the administration here has heard me talk about this before. Like, was still torn on whether I wanted to go into teaching or ministry. And I, for those you kids know that I was youth pastor for about 4 years. And so I was really torn on it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to apply at just the places like right around here. I'm not going to apply in like across the state. Of course, my father talked me into applying across the state anyway, so I ended up applying at like 10 places, something like that. Got 1 interview. And
at least I got more interviews.
And that 1 interview was at Charleston. And so I had gone down to Texas because it was summer and I didn't have a place to stay at the time. And so I had gone down to Texas and I was just waiting for a phone call and applying more online places across the state. And I just didn't have connections anywhere. Like, I'm not from the state, so I didn't really know people who knew people as much. And there weren't openings at the places where I had student taught. So I didn't have those kind of connections either. And I'm down there and I get a phone call and they're like, hey, can you come in and interview tomorrow? And I was like, well, I'm in Texas. And they're like, okay, when can you interview? I was like, how about Monday? I think it was Monday. It was either Monday or Tuesday of the next week, and that was on a Friday. or Thursday, I guess, because they wanted me to come in Friday. So I drove the long trek up from Texas, my nice 15-hour drive or whatever it is when you drive slow and the speed limit, and got up here, stayed at my grandparents' house in Dexter, drove over to Charleston, where I had never been before in my life, and went in for the interview. And I was expecting, I hadn't had an interview before, and so I was expecting it to be like maybe a couple teachers and then like the principal, and that was about all I expected. So I went in, and there was superintendent, assistant principal, a couple teachers. So there's like a board of people. And I was like, okay, like, all right.
When I interviewed at Crothersville used the same approach where you walk in and there's like 8 people sitting around a table all staring at you.
Yes.
Actually, this is a funny story with that. We can actually mention his name. He graduated. Antoine Jones.
Oh, yes.
His dad is a principal, and at the time he was at Crothersville, and I remember being in on the interview, and I was like, yeah, I'll do anything. He's like, will you coach baton? I was like, I don't have no idea how to do baton, but Mr. Jones, I will coach the heck out of it. He was like, I like that style.
Well, see, so that's kind of what I ran into there in my first interview, was I very quickly realized they were looking for an assistant football coach. And I was like, hey, I played football for 3 years in high school. Like, I know all about defensive backs and routes and all that kind of stuff. I can do the secondary on offense or defense very basically. And so I was like, I'll require a lot of coaching to be a coach, but I'm totally willing if you want to do it. And they were like, okay, well, our position currently has, what was it? It was one class at the high school and one class at the middle school. And they're like, so are you willing to drive between 2 buildings? And I was like you said, sure, absolutely. I will drive between those 2 buildings, and I will be there exactly when I need to be there and be on time. And they're like, okay. And I don't know if I'm even supposed to say this necessarily, but the superintendent at the time, who I will not name, pulled out a stack of applications. I don't know if it was really applications, but he told me it was applications, and it was like 2 feet high. And he slaps them down on the desk, and he goes, so what makes you more qualified than these people? And I was like, holy cow.
I never had that happen.
And I was like, to be perfectly honest, probably a lot of them have more experience than me. And I was like, really, the only thing I can think of is I'm a social studies person. I've been a social studies nerd my whole life. My dad was in the military, and I've lived around the world at different places. So I've had this experience of teaching in diverse situations. And I walked out of that at first just going, holy crap. like
there's no chance I got that.
Nope. And I walked out, and before I made it out the front door, one of the assistant principals popped their head out and said, can you come back in for a second? And I was like, I'm in trouble. I was like, what did I do? I said something bad. And so I walked back in, and I'm like...
how would you have gotten in trouble?
I don't even know. I just always assume.
Is that still like you're still like young?
Yeah, I was new. I didn't know what I was doing. So I walked back in there, and they're like, could you, just have a seat for a second? And I'm like, okay. And I sat down, and they're like, would you like the job? And I'm like, whoa, what? And, I didn't fully understand at the time that they had like 21 openings. They needed teachers.
So yeah, Charleston traditionally was known for laying off about a third of their staff every year.
And so for me, it was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know, I didn't know the game. I didn't know if it was like a test. Like, am I supposed to be like, yes, absolutely, I'll take the job? Or should I be like, I'll think about it? So what I said is, can I have 24 hours and let you know? And they said, absolutely. And so I called them back and was like, yeah, I'll do it. And that was my first teaching job. And it was absolutely a blessing because, like I said, it was the only interview I got called in for, and they gave me the job on the spot. And I ended up coaching football for the first year. And you can probably ask the coaches, I probably did a terrible job of it, but I had some fun out there. I was more like a water boy for the football coaches.
Oh, man. That's funny.
That is the only year I've coached, by the way. Beta Club is much more my vein for right now.
Oh yeah, the 1 year I coached, I had no idea what I was doing, and luckily there was someone that knew what they were doing. They kind of helped push me in the right direction, but they were like, just do this, just make sure you do this every day. And I'm like, okay. I
was the most useless football coach, not because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. I coached wide receivers and defensive backs on a team that only ran the ball.
Oh yeah, so you were good. Here's the thing. Here's how inadequate I was to be a baseball coach. Is one of the things you have to do is hit like hit the infield, like do like the infield drill.
Yeah.
I had no idea even how to do that. Like I was horrible at that.
Like that, were you the what's it called, fungo or whatever?
Yeah, with the bungo bat and
Yeah.
like pow, pow, pow. Like I was all over the place with it.
Oh gosh, yeah. So there you go. That was how I got my first job.
All right. What about, all right, so most of the time, your first year teacher, you have a lot of crazy things that happen to you. Like, being a teacher in general, you have a lot of crazy things that happen to you. But I remember being in like, when I was in college, they always said, like, the first year is the one that really, like, is seared into your brain. Like, a lot of crazy things will happen that first year. And that's, like, where the craziest stuff will happen. That's the one you will remember the most vividly. So what is one of your craziest first-year teaching stories?
Oh my goodness, it's hard to narrow it down. It's genuinely hard to narrow it down. I had at the time the football coaching thing, and I was doing teaching for the first time, and I'm teaching at a high school and a middle school, and thankfully I didn't have EOCs that I was teaching to because it took me a couple years to get to the point. Now that I'm here, I've figured it out. I know how to teach to an EOC. At the time, I wouldn't have known.
But so with that said, I stress out about EOCs as well, and that was the first time I had ever taught one, and I actually had English too, an EOC that is tested.
Yeah.
And I threw up the day before the EOC, like the
Oh,
day of the EOC.
gosh.
Like I was out in the parking lot, and I was like, oh gosh, like they might just tell me to go home and like call Campbell and say don't hire this guy because they scored so bad, and like I threw up out in the parking lot.
And they probably, knowing you, got like 85.
I got 75.
Yeah, see, there you go. I've never gotten that, and you got it your first year. But anyway, so the year was just crazy in general. I was waking up at like 5:30 and leaving my house in Cape, because I lived in Cape because there was nowhere to live in Charleston, and commuting down. I wouldn't get back until after 9 o'clock every night. And usually I was doing something all day. And so I'd get back at 9, and then I'd have to grade, and then I'd have to do stuff. So I'd go to the SEMO library and do all of that. So there's probably a lot of crazy
That'd be
memories.
nice.
Yeah.
I do miss the SEMO library.
Oh, yeah.
The SEMO, like...
It was nice.
Like, kids, as soon as you go to college, like, you think, oh, a library, boo, like, that's lame. But the library is by far the best place in the entire campus.
Yes. It's a great place to
it's
study,
quiet.
great place to go, just in general. But the...
You can take a nap sometimes.
Yeah, I did that several times at Kent Library. So I then, for crazy stories, like, I for sure struggled with anxiety stuff. I struggle a lot with anxiety. Thankfully, God has helped me a lot with it. But He kept me too busy that first year to get anxious because I would just crash. It'd be like as soon as the task was done, I was face down asleep on the task, and then I'd get wake up and move on. But I did have multiple actually fights that I got to help break up, and there was legitimately at one point a fight that involved approximately 20 students, and I am not a large man. And thankfully there were lots of large people there to help break it up, and it was something that was not even really school related. Sadly, some stuff had gone outside, and I won't get too far into it, but me attempting to break up a fight.
All right, I'm not laughing at your story right
Yes.
now. All right, earlier today, a student was walking by and was like, "Where's Mr. Norman?" I was like, "Oh, just look in there. He's small. He's hard to see sometimes. He's in there somewhere." And that's the reason why I was laughing, because you said
Yes.
I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, side story on this story, and that is everywhere I've gone, everyone mistakes me for a student. My first year teaching here, Coach Branscombe walked in to the computer lab, and I was sitting there in the computer lab with my laptop open, and I think I was grading a test that they had just finished, and all the kids are on computers. He walks in, I turn and look straight at him. He looks around the room and goes, "Where's your teacher?" And I raised my hand. And he looked at me and went, "Oh, yeah." So yes.
And he was your mentor teacher.
Yes, he was he knew what I looked like. So it wasn't his fault. It was just me. Anyway, I blended. Yeah, I'm sure that the kids sitting next to me were larger than me. So that was a crazy thing, just because I had never been in anything like that. Now, the place where I went to high school, there were stabbings and stuff. Like, it was crazy. Oh, yeah. If we want to go high school stories from when we were in high school, that was way crazier than anywhere. Like, a lot of people give Charles.
I'm not going to say high school stories when I'm
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you live here. Yeah. But I had a lot of people talking to me after I worked at Charleston. I loved working in Charleston. Those kids are awesome, and I really did enjoy working with those kids. But a lot of people give it a bad rap. They're like, "Oh, man, that place is terrible." I was like, not as bad as where I went to high school. Like, I never had a stabbing when I was working there as a teacher. But anyway, so that was probably the craziest one from first year, was little first-year teacher me going, the heck am I supposed to do? So what I did is I walked up to this pile of people fighting each other and grabbed an ankle of the smallest person I could find, and I pulled the small person off the pile by his ankle. And then, thankfully, a couple of our football players that were actually like really good kids came in and grabbed the two instigators, and the kids and a couple of the administrators there, who were significantly larger and more qualified than I, actually broke the fight up. But that was my attempt, was grabbing the small person by the ankle and pulling them away from the fight. So...
Say, where do you want to start with mine? Do you want the shirt story, the moon story, or do you want another random story?
Let's see. I don't remember what the shirt one was.
So we'll do that one.
Yeah.
All right, so the shirt story. This is like North Pim had all kinds of crazy stories, I'm not going to lie. All right. In fact, like I could talk about how we had a fight every single day for 2 straight weeks that started in my class over a tissue. But that's not this story. All right.
I kind of want to hear that story now.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Anyway, so this story, the shirt story, we were actually reading The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. I think it was Act 2. And this was back when I still gave tests instead of doing essays like I do now. And I was trying to give a test over Julius Caesar. And I was going through the class, and I got to the last student, and I gave him the test, and the kid knocked the test off the thing. He's like, I'm not taking the test. I'm like, okay. And I pick up the test and I put it back on his desk, and he knocks it off again. I'm like, you're going to take the test. And he gets up out of his chair, takes off of his shirt, and gets up into my face and says, what are you going to do about it? And I just...
Put your clothes on, child.
No. Here's how I answered it. I was like, number 1, you're going to put your shirt back on. Number 2, you're going to sit down. And number 3, you're going to take the test. At that point, he turns around, flips the test, and says some cuss words at me and marches out of the room. And I'm like, all right. And I call the office, like, so-and-so's on the way to the office. They're shirtless. They threatened to fight me. So do whatever you need to do.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So that was the shirtless. The kid took his shirt off to...
This was for Julius Caesar?
For Act 2 of Julius Caesar, yeah.
Oh man, you couldn't even go et tu Brute or
nope. We hadn't even got to that point yet where they stabbed Caesar. No, we didn't.
Shankety shank.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I got a student took his shirt off in response to taking a test. If that happens here, of course you'll be going across the street.
Yes. I have never. I've been flipped off innumerable times. Several of them here, most of them by the same student who has graduated, but I'm still not mentioning their name. Still not mentioning his name, but he knows who he is, and probably everyone else does too. Yeah. But no, I've never had a. Actually, I did have a student break a desk yesterday. You also know who you are, but it was just because he was trying to ride it like a rocking horse. Anyway. But yeah, no table flipping going on.
No desk flipping. I'll tell you the moon story too while we're at it. This story
was it a crescent or a waning gibbous?
Oh, it was a full.
A full moon.
It was a full moon. I think we were reading To Kill a Mockingbird. We were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was
Atticus.
And we're in the middle.
Sorry,
we were in the middle of the class, and we were talking about it. And at some point, I'm like have my back turned, and I'm like writing something on the board, and I turn back, and I hear screaming. And I turn back around, and I just see a kid's bare behind to the entire class. And I just stopped there for a second. I'm like, what the heck am I going to do about this? Because the principal actually was out of town at that time. So we had no administrator on campus at the time. I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with this?
You have good enough aim with a stapler. You could probably put an end to that pretty quick.
And there's kids, like the kid next to him kept on screaming, my eyes, I'm blind. And I'm just like, And so I tell the student, like, all right, pull your pants back up, go. And luckily I was in the same building as the library, and the librarian was over there, and she could watch him. I was like, just go stay with the librarian until the end of class. And so he leaves. And we recover. And this was 6th hour. And at that point in time, I had a 7th hour prep. And so at the end of sixth hour, I bring the kid back in my room. I'm like, why did you do that? Why? Like, why? Like, I'm going to have to get you in trouble as soon as the principal gets back tomorrow. Why did you do this? And he looked me straight in the face and dead serious said, I got double dog dared.
You can't go back from the double dog dare.
And I was like, as funny as that sounds, I'm going to have to get you in trouble.
That's one of those ones where you chuckle mildly and then say, you still have to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, those are the top two. Those are usually my two go-to North Pim stories.
Yeah, definitely the Moon story was a higher quality mainly because of the kid screaming my eyes.
Yeah.
That was solid.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
All right, so those are the all right, so I'll keep it there because my craziest story is actually kind of a sad story, and so I don't want to go into that crazy story. And I gave you two stories.
Okay.
So, do you have a crazier story that did not happen in your first 2 years or your first year of teaching?
Okay. Yes, I have one from my second year of teaching.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I have some stories from here as well, but they're just none will ever top the combo story of what I'm about to tell you here. So I had several students where I would talk a lot to my students and try to help them with stuff because there were a lot of the students there that were going on with they had so much more going on with them outside of school. They had parents dying. I had someone whose mother had gotten shot. I had all these things. And so I was always like, if there was a test and the kid was just in a funk, I'd pull him outside and I'd be like, hey, what's going on? And if there was genuinely something going on and I could verify that what they were telling me was true, sometimes I'd be like, okay, listen, you need to go talk to the counselor, hang out with them for a little bit. You can take this test tomorrow. I'd work with them. So one day, I was delivering a paper into the, oh my goodness, I almost said...
ISS.
Yeah, ISS. I'm thinking PAC because that's what we call it here. But so I was delivering it into the ISS room, and as I walk in, I'm talking to the teacher, and we're both standing there at her desk, the ISS teacher and then I just hear a kid start sobbing behind me. And I turn around, and there is a student who is kind of looming over another student, and I did not know at the time they were dating. But
that's not healthy.
The student who was looming over the young lady was very threatening in his posture and his tone of voice, but I couldn't hear what they were saying because it had just happened. Like he just gruffed something at her and then stomped away. And so I was closer, so I walked over instead of the ISS teacher, and I was delivering stuff for this student to do anyway. And I was like, hey, here's the stuff you were supposed to do. Like, what just happened? Like, what did he? And she started dropping F-bombs on me, but I could tell it wasn't at me. It was because of what
directing through. Yeah,
it was what had just happened. And I was like, hey, listen, like, did he just threaten you? Like, what just happened? Because I need to be able to tell somebody. And as I'm starting to say that, and she is actually trying to respond, he comes flying at me, yelling with profanity about how it's not of my business and he's going to kill me. And I was like, okay, he's just mad. He's saying he's going to kill me, whatever. I turn around and he's coming at me and he's cocking back to throw a punch. And thankfully, there was another kid who was in ISS who was a very good-hearted kid. Once again, won't mention a name, but a much larger student who came up behind him and just vice gripped him around the arms, so he couldn't come at me. And so we got an officer down there and the principal in there, and he was still yelling F-bombs and saying he was going to kill me and was starting to threaten the principal as they came in, and just it was a bad situation. Turns out he was abusive and had been abusing her and all of that. It was bad. I forgot about it. I mean, didn't forget about it in the sense of I never thought about it, but just like it didn't kind of cross my mind after I moved on from working there. But then I lived in Sikeston. And one day I picked up the Sikeston newspaper, and on the front of the Sikeston newspaper was this student's face. And the headline with the face is Charleston man arrested after attempted murder. And he had attempted to murder the other student. And I was like, holy crap, this kid would actually have tried to kill me. And for me, retroactively realizing that kid genuinely would have been willing to murder me in that moment made that whole situation a whole lot more like, oh my goodness, if that other bigger kid hadn't been there, because the teacher lady who was in there would not have been able to stop this kid from beating the crap out of me. And so I am incredibly thankful that this other kid was in ISS on that same day.
And was able to keep the attempted murderer.
Yeah, or I would probably have died, or at least been genuinely broken.
Genuinely?
Yeah, so...
Oh, that might just be the title of this episode, Genuinely Broken.
So... Anyway, so that was my craziest story by far. I've been cussed out before. I've had all kinds of other crazy stuff. That is the only time I think my life has ever been in danger teaching. And I didn't know it at the time until afterwards when I found out he was genuinely capable.
Whoa, genuinely broken.
Yeah, I mean, hey. So I'm thankful that whatever God had that kid do to get in ISS, that he had the big kid there to save me.
Well, that was what we originally had planned to talk about. Those were the things we were going to talk about last episode with Mr. Angotti. But now you got to hear them. Now that has been out. And now we'll move on towards our next episode, which will be whenever. I believe we're going to do some madness because it is the
I believe our
March.
Our next episode will probably be some madness. Just look out for some interesting bracketeering. That's all I will say.
All right, but until next time, my name is Paul Davidson.
And my name is, and Lord willing will be, Scott Norman.
And we've been two
Dumb White Guys.